Just 12 minutes.
在学校怎么样？
Growing up, I would dream about leaving home. I'm reminded of this feeling whenever I visit my childhood home, a beautiful prison frozen in time. When my parents first bought their house, my dad and I tailored it to perfection. We replaced the carpet downstairs with porcelain tile, a smooth surface for easy cleaning. To match the floors and amplify the natural light, we installed a large white table in the dining room. The promise was that we'd all have a place to come together, a dwelling fit for a family of 4.
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system.
When I look outside, I lose all sense of what's behind me. The contents of my room, the weight of my past, the dimensions of the walls around me. Letting these things fall away is a willful act of delusion. At the same time, a demonstration of hope. Even though I left home the way I always dreamt, I still catch myself imagining something better. The thing about imagination is that if you piece together all the right moments, you can find in the sum of their parts a version of reality that suddenly makes sense. If Act 1 was the hard part, this part was supposed to be the payoff. The convergence of dreams and reality. Somewhere along the lines, it was no longer enough. Like a drifting balloon, I float higher the more hollow I feel. I needed to be retethered, grounded in something real. By the time I went back, it had already been over 20 years, pretty much my whole life. Call it what you want, exploration, rekindling, curiosity. It was my first real time seeing my ancestral home. I could hardly believe that my parents and the generations before them grew up in what's now one of the largest cosmopolitan cities in the world. In my head, I was always the one to leave their old ways in the dust on the path to bigger and better things. But this narrative was born in the States, from a place of isolation. So that raises the question. If my parents had stayed and started our family in their hometown, what kind of life would I have imagined for myself then? I wonder if I would have still felt the need to escape. When I was 9 months old, I was sent off to Shanghai to live with relatives. It wasn't until I returned over 20 years later that I realized what a village I had behind my back. Seeing how hard it was for my parents to find their footing all on their own in the States, I couldn't help but question whether the ends justified the means. Meanwhile, the home they left behind in China has continued to evolve rapidly, in many ways becoming unrecognizable from the place they grew up.
我以前就住在这里，马当路，就住在这后边。本来我们家就在这个位置，我们家这个门就在位置。对，我们本来就这门就在上去的时候，我们在第1号。现在没了，你看。是上学是吧？上前方，对我就是我们这个位房就叫上前方，上前方。
When my parents think about home, I wonder what comes to mind. By the time I started middle school, my family would only be able to come together for special occasions and holidays. Every Thanksgiving, around my birthday, I think of all the ways I changed since my mom last saw me. And then I noticed how she'd look different herself. New hairstyles and colors, mostly black displaced by gray. One year I was suddenly taller than her, and eventually I couldn't tell whether I was still growing or her posture was getting worse. If there's one thing that could ground me against my lofty, flighty, idealistic dreams, it's the constant indifference of a ticking clock. When I think about home, I'm reminded of what's familiar. Places I know so well, they become special to me.
对吧？我下来。有点滑的这样，滑天。
这是蛋糕呢？
在这里面。没有蛋糕的，就是一片蛋糕。好，快点过来。
帮我把这个垃圾好扔掉嘛。
可以。
这里有一个垃圾。
这个对了，这个是 24，他这个24对了，但是他应该是31。你们就等于爸爸现在和妈妈已经不在世上了，你们怎么样 survive？ 就这样 ，OK？
如果就是他再过 half year， 他就变成32了，就是他24，他32。
对。
其实不是正好8 years，是7.5啊。
好了，大家吃饭。
也不是哪里人。
哎，我打开啊，我帮你打开。但是那个方向不对了。
那转一个180度了，180度。
Okay.
啊好。
因为分开来了，并拢一点。
没关系的。
土跟佛要下在一起的呀。
好。没关系的。
好。
Make a wish.
Okay.
你 record 了？
Yeah， 已经在 record 了。Happy birthday.
Thank you. Back home in the suburbs, the sky catches my attention more than anything. Sometimes, in the quiet of my childhood bedroom, you could almost hear the sky itself filtering through the windows, as if to whisper, "You and I are not as far apart as it seems." When puddles form after rain, the sky comes down to meet me. We must have crossed paths here dozens of times before, in middle school PE or during all the lunches I spent on these blacktops, dashing and bouncing and dribbling all the way up to the bell. I can't blame myself for failing to notice back then. You would bring with you to the ground colors and textures found nowhere else, and I never paid attention because, while the world changed around me, you've always been the same. Different each time in your arrangement, but the same in that you've always been there, far away or on the ground, or streaming through my window, whether or not I was there to embrace it.